Nowadays, it's not enough to just be a developer anymore. You have to have another skill. You have to. Everyone can be a developer. Everyone and their mother can go on YouTube, study for 6 months, you're a dev. Nowadays, we even prioritize people who don't have university. I don't care if you have university. Show me the scrapper who figured it all out on his own or on her own and built something. I want to see what you built. Yeah? Good. You're hired. Over the person who has a university degree.
Welcome to the Exponential Growth Podcast, where we demystify what it takes to break into tech. I'm your host, James Hudnall, and my goal is to highlight real-life examples of people with non-traditional backgrounds moving into careers they love, so you can too. Hey everyone. Today I'm joined by Oshri Cohen, a self-taught engineer, the fractional CTO, a former founder and executive at multiple companies, a coach, and a prolific LinkedIn user. Oshri, that was a mouthful. Welcome to Exponential Growth.
Thank you. I feel very welcome.
Yes, you are welcome. And I want to go back and dive deep into your origin story, but before we go there, can you maybe sketch a high-level outline of what you do today?
What I do today is I offer executive technical leadership at a fraction of the time and also a fraction of the cost. And I'm not the first one to identify. I'm not taking credit for the fractional CTO concept, but I was one of the early adopters in North America for sure. And I've identified that most startups don't need a full-time CTO. And the ones who want a full-time CTO actually can't get one, either because they can't pay for one, and so they get a student or they get someone with a few years of experience. That's not a CTO, that's a developer. And if they did have the money, that executive CTO doesn't want to work for them full-time because there just isn't enough work for them to do. That's the reality. They just don't have enough work to do. And so these early stage companies are, screwed. Unfortunately, there's no good solution for them, right? There's no good solution for them, especially since a lot of them have fallen for the fallacy that they can get people on equity, which sounds great, right? Sounds fantastic. Hey, here's 10% of the company. But if you get someone on equity, you're getting one of two people. The person who's living in his mother's basement. How much experience can you have? Or the eccentric millionaire. Well, how many of those are going to want to work for your startup, right? And so I've carved out this nice niche. I have people calling me all the time. Case in point, I took the summer off completely. I had one client and I was working on small projects. For me, that's the summer off because it's not 12-hour days. And within a week and a half to 2 weeks, my pipeline has filled up to now $750,000 of opportunities in 3 weeks with zero marketing.
Yeah, no, I love that. You've created this role and this niche for yourself. And I think I heard that you maybe borrowed the idea or got the original inspiration from the North American version from your European friends. But before we go there, Oshri, I want to go back to where I heard you describe yourself as the quintessential 13-year-old that taught themselves to code. And I think I also understand you were a bit of a vigilante at that time. So why don't you paint that picture for the audience? Because I do think this is going to help inform this conversation and your journey into tech.
Okay, absolutely. We're gonna open that can of worms. Fair enough. Not a problem. It's my fault. I put it on the internet. So yes. I'm 13 years old. I got my first computer, started messing around with coding and whatnot. And the first thing I did on a computer is I started downloading illegal games. Of course, because my parents didn't have money. They weren't going to spend $50 on a video game. Come on. That was nuts. So I went in with lack of morals and ethics. And it was so prolific and so easy to use. What is called the dark web now, or the dark net, whatever they call it. Well, that was the internet back then. You had very few websites, and the rest were, connect by IP address to this server, random server, and they'll help you and they'll serve whatever it is that they have, right? They were called zero-day servers. Basically, as soon as a game or music gets dropped or a movie gets dropped, they have it and available, right? I even ran one of those servers for a little while until my father saw the bill. And then, it was not a fun conversation.
I remember the early, the AOL would send out CDs, and then parents would have
AOL.
a couple $100 phone bill. Those were not fun
right?
in a different way.
And what I realized is me and my friends were, downloading and whatnot. And at some point, people were sharing horrendous content. I will spare you the details. wildly illegal content and immoral content. So I will let your imagination go there, right? And we went to the police. We went to a police station, right? I went. My friends were all over the country. I never actually met them. It's just the internet, right?
Yep.
I was 13-year-old talking to random people. Who knows, right? Thank you, mom and dad, for that one. I went to a police station to say we saw children on video. Like this is like what do we do? They looked at me. They're like, what do you want us to do? What's the internet?
Right.
This was in the late 90s, mid 90s. What's the internet? We don't know. We don't understand this concept. Okay. So, all right. Let's leave that one alone because they were useless. And so I learned to write viruses. The short of it all is I learned to write viruses.
But it was from an altruistic intent, I believe.
From an altruistic intent. I learned to write viruses. My goal was to destroy their machines for having done that. So what we would do is, and back then with Windows 95, you could rename any executable as a JPEG, as a movie, as a whatever, and the system would still execute it. Nowadays, that won't happen anymore because there's a lot of controls. But back then, you could even write code that controls the hard drive head of the spinning hard drives back then to crash into the drive. Yeah, that's a fun one. And so I figured it out with the help of many, many people that were already doing stuff like that, right? And we would reshare them with horrendous titles, as you can imagine, right? Reshare them and then watch them go offline basically almost forever.
Yeah.
Right? Back then a machine was $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. It wasn't as easy to just get a laptop. You wouldn't get a laptop by mail.
Yeah.
Right? And so that was my introduction to software development. I learned networking, I learned system development, and so on and so forth. I did that for like a year and a half. I started getting banned from these areas because their people were complaining. Okay, that's fine. That's okay. I was there to attack. And I stopped as soon as we started seeing it on, there was a couple of shows, To Catch a Predator. Okay, now we're seeing this happen. Now we're seeing people are paying attention. We're done with this.
Yep.
So I did it for about a year and a half. I must have destroyed $100,000, $200,000 worth of equipment, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, from altruistic intent.
I am 100% proud of it. They deserve that.
I'm glad you painted that picture, and pulling on that thread a little bit, it's not related to the subject, but I think I heard your first programming language was C++. Is that right?
Yes, C++.
Can you, now I'm not a C++ developer. I use Java and Scala in my day-to-day work at LinkedIn, but I'm curious. I can't imagine C++ as a first language at the time that you are learning it, because you don't have Code Academy back then. You don't have all the many resources we have. How did you learn at that time?
Books. I went to the library, and the library happened to have the books. So I went to the library and literally just sat there and read, asked people for help. The internet back then was the internet community was very open and welcoming. If you asked for help, someone would sit there and help you. You send them the code, they would send it back to you. We didn't have collaboration tools, nothing. Zip it, send it to me. It takes a minute to send the code. Nowadays, share screen, whatnot, boom, boom. In seconds, milliseconds, you're connected with somebody. Back then, there was no such thing as a video chat.
Right.
There was no bandwidth, right? Heck, back then, chatting was typing and you wouldn't see the text. Like, you would be typing and it would send, but you wouldn't see it. I don't know why. But anyway, I think it was Telnet. Okay. And so it was a pain, but heck, I was 13 years old. What else did I have to do?
Yeah. No, you did it.
Bills.
You did it. And let me ask you, so at that point, Oshri, did you kind of see yourself going down that path as a quote-unquote adult? Were you thinking that far ahead? I know I wasn't when I was that age, but I'm curious because you seem... Okay.
I wasn't thinking about tech as a career. For me, it was just fun. Okay. I wanted to be a doctor. I was a problem solver. I wanted to be a doctor. But the path laid in front of me did not allow me to do so. I'm in a province in Canada where if you don't pass your French, you're not getting into university, buddy. You're done. Okay. And it was very, very limiting and very unfortunate to where I was. But I also became who I am now because of it. So maybe it was good. Who knows?
Yeah. And I think
make more money than a doctor, so...
Yeah, there you go. And I think you also went on to work at a few, I believe, medical companies, tech-related, but medical-adjacent companies that you had a lot of fun that I want to get to as well. But maybe going back to this time or the years that followed shortly thereafter, I think I heard we're coming up on the 2000s thereabouts, and there was, those weren't the best times in terms of maybe getting into tech or tech writ large. So what was that like trying to, I guess, graduate high school or?
Well, I actually didn't graduate high school because the final exam in our province is pass fail at that point, and I failed with a 59. I feel like they just, I feel personally insulted. Honestly, I'm like 59. Come on, come on. You could have 60, and my whole life would have changed by 1 point.
Right.
1 point.
Right.
But I feel like they had to do that. They had to have a certain amount of failures, right? For the curve, whatever it is. And I feel like they decided I got randomly selected. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Can I ask you about that, Oshri? Was that was French that you're talking about?
Yes,
is that right?
It was French.
Okay,
Everything else I passed with flying colors.
Now, you are, by all metrics, successful today, but going back to that time and maybe specifically French, what do you attribute maybe your struggles to? Were you just disinterested in the subject matter? Were you rebellious? You didn't want to learn it because they said you had to?
No, I'm perfectly bilingual. I speak French perfectly. I write perfectly. The problem is the way that if I recall correctly, is the way the exam was structured. They asked you to write an essay, and you know what? I can write an email. I can't write an essay in French.
Okay.
I read French books, I watch French movies, and I listen to French music because I'm Francophone. I learned English at 18 only. I was 100% French speaking and reading up until I left school. I didn't speak a lick of English, except for online and a little bit typing my bad broken English, right?
Right.
And code, I guess. Code is English, I guess. So that was a bit traumatic event. And by then, I had started already to do contracts in software development and whatnot. Started at 16, I was already doing that. I had a small business where I was helping people set up their machines, and I was selling them illegal software because I had, my father asked me, he's like, what are you doing with all of these CD drives in your room? It's like, nothing. And he's like, okay, let's just not ask questions. Let's just not ask questions. He bought himself a sports car at 18. We're fine.
Got it.
Something's going on.
Yeah.
He didn't ask us for the money. We're good.
Okay.
So, entrepreneur at a very young age, I wouldn't recommend anyone follow the path I did because you go to jail very, very quickly now. But back then, they had no way of controlling it, right?
Yeah.
And so I graduated from high school. And I decided, since university is not in my future, let me apply for software development. Back then, software development required a university degree. As if university actually teaches you something in software development. What they teach you is software engineering, which is a skill you can pick up in about a year or so, right? Understanding how, I don't need to learn how a programming language is written. I really, nobody ever needs this. Sure. If you do, you can take specialized courses. Yeah. So when I saw the curriculum, I'm like, okay, I'm not missing much in this case. I already know web development. Well, back then it was very, very difficult and not as sexy as it is now. Now we have so many tools. We can whip out web applications in mere hours. Back then it was weeks and weeks of work, right? And so I already had everything I needed to learn. I had database experience. I had everything. I've proven it. I would get 0 jobs. 0 jobs. Also 2000, 2001, it was a dot-com bubble. You had 5 jobs from one company, and that's as far as it went. And you had to be in Montreal, where I'm based off of right now. However, remote work didn't exist. You weren't open to anywhere else. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll move to New York. I don't know. Nothing. 0. Yeah. I got my first job through my father, who worked... he's a plumber. He fixed a leaky pipe somewhere. He saw they have computers. Like, you guys need programmers? Yes, we do. My son's coming tomorrow. Okay. Nice. To interview. that was the conversation. I showed up and I'm like, oh, so I'm building porn sites. Okay. Fantastic.
So
but I need a
job. Gig?
That was my first gig. I needed the money. Obviously, I needed the job. That's it. I'm 18. In my head, 18, you're an adult. Like, you have to move out. Like, let's go. Yep. Right? I didn't move out, but that's what I did. And I worked there for about 3 years until, the content gets to you. It's it eats at your soul. It really does. I mean, ask anyone who has an addiction with that. It eats at your soul, right?
Sure.
It's a disgusting environment. You don't want to be there. It's a very bro culture. The things I can remember the things we talked about. If I said an iota of this in an office, I think I would be removed in handcuffs.
Yeah.
Because nowadays, there's no messing around, right?
Yeah.
And so I worked there. I did really good work. I rebuilt servers. I did beautiful stuff, right? Architecturally speaking, code speaking, right? Content is what it is. And then I left after 3 years. The reason why I left is I quit because they didn't understand who I was. I was a problem solver, and they were looking for managers. Okay. And back then, and this is going right into this conversation, back then, developers, if they wanted to get promoted to a higher tier of salary, you were a developer or you are a manager. That's it. Nowadays, you could be a developer for 40 years. You can make you $500,000 a year coding for Netflix, coding for LinkedIn, right? I'm sure there's developers at LinkedIn clocking close to $1 million. Maybe the guy who pisses people off with notifications, that person, right?
No comment.
I think maybe that's you. I don't know.
Comment.
No comment.
Me, not yet.
That's it. So that was the problem, and I left because I was passed over for a promotion. Okay. And I went to a consulting firm. And because I had a plan in my mind, I was formulating a plan in my mind. I wanted to have a custom development shop. I saw the opportunity. I saw the money. It made sense to me. Yeah. I was a problem solver. Yeah. Like a client would come to me and I would give them within a few minutes, I would spew out the entire design of the system. It just came really, really easy to me. Sure. Okay. I attribute my dyslexia to that because I can think in so many different patterns and see it all. Yeah. Right. And to this day, this is what I'm known for. I'm the problem solver. I see a problem and I take a completely different solution that everybody else thought of.
I heard you describing the fractional CTO gig that you have now as being, you've got to be really good at the context switches just with all the different Slack conversations and everything that you're in. So
speaking of context switches, 5 times, 6 times a day. I'll switch problems completely, industries. It'll be a podcast, it'll be a lead, it'll be this, it'll be that. And my brain loves it. Yeah. My brain absolutely loves it. Yeah. However, I get very tired at the end of the day.
Sure.
My wife tries to talk to me and I'm like, honey, nothing's.
Give me a minute.
Send me an email. Tomorrow morning, not a problem. Text me. I'll add it to the queue.
Let me ask you, Oshri, so maybe at this point coming up and leaving that first gig, you were there for a few years. At what point did you go back and I think I heard you got like a 1-year certificate program just to check a box? I'm curious when that came into play.
I did that in between. Okay. I did that in between. It was supposed to be a full-time gig, like full-time school, but you could do it at your own pace. It was for 1 year and it was Bobo. I spent $15,000 on a document that I never, ever used. In fact, I never even ordered my certificate. Like, I didn't need it. I just did not need it. I finished it in 6 months, right? Especially when the first class is, this is a keyboard and this is a mouse. Thank you. Yeah. Great. Awesome. I just wasted a month. Yeah. So I finished it in 6 months, right? How to build applications and web applications and whatnot. I needed a piece of paper to prove that I knew what I was working. So I was hedging my bets, basically. Sure. If I do this and I do this and I do that, maybe I'll be able to get another job. Yeah. But my plans changed at some point. So I said, if I want to get into business for myself, I have to understand how to speak to business people. So far, I only spoke to developers. So I got a job with a consulting company selling enterprise-grade software, CRMs and whatnot, preparing proposals, and then developing the solution itself. So I got to sit with CEOs, I got to sit with CFOs, get a real understanding for their problems, for their challenges. And this is the key. Nowadays, it's not enough to just be a developer anymore. You have to have another skill. You have to. Everyone can be a developer. Everyone and their mother can go on YouTube, study for 6 months, you're a dev. Nowadays, we even prioritize people who don't have university. I don't care if you have university. Show me the scrapper who figured it all out on his own or on her own and built something. I want to see what you built. Yeah? Good. You're hired. Over the person who has a university degree. Because the person who has a university degree is in engineering. Great. Go work in the basement of LinkedIn's offices working on their algo. No one's going to talk to you. You'll be hacking away all day long because you know how the system operates. The rest of the developers are up there in the sunshine. Yep. Unfortunately, that's the case, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you highlight that though, because there are multiple paths. There's not, and I'm absolutely biased. I've got that non-traditional background. A couple of years ago, Oshri, I was working on a tugboat, and I attended a boot camp. I had my light bulb moment when I discovered programming, and again, long story short, I've landed a role at LinkedIn now. So I am absolutely partial towards that non-traditional path, but I'm also glad that you've got the traditional path for the more traditional student, or maybe the square peg in the square hole as opposed to the vice versa. So I'm glad you've got multiple options, but I'm so enthralled by your story because it seems to be, maybe on the surface, a set of disjoint experiences, but when you zoom out and observe it holistically, I see that each part kind of informed or was informed by the previous, and they build a foundation that is, I don't need to tell you, is absolutely rock solid. So I want to ask you, shortly, now you're working in consulting, but soon you want to go out on your own. I think you're around 25 or something like that at the time. And maybe if you want to summarize for those listening, I cheated a little bit. I heard another conversation you had. You had a lot of balls in the air you were juggling at the time, and that didn't turn out great. You want to maybe tell that story?
Yeah, it didn't turn out great. It didn't turn out great. My bosses ended up being idiots. And I was very clear about that. You can say that I have a problem with authority, but the reality is that for my problem, particularly for my life, I saw what my bosses didn't see, and I was too anxious and too impatient to allow myself to just wait. Okay. I didn't want to do that. I couldn't. I'm like, I see a solution. I'm like, we can build 6 different solutions right now. Give me an extra 2 weeks. No. Oh. We can spin this out as another business, right? Oh, no. Okay. Oh, well, what am I going to tell you? No. Eventually, you lose your people. And you know what? Behind every startup founder, behind every single startup founder is a bad employer. Very few employers spin out their employees' innovations. Shopify does that. Lightspeed POS did that. They have their Lightspeed babies, their Shopify babies. An employee came in, I have a great idea, fund me. Okay, great. That's how you keep your talent. You make a ton of money with almost zero risk. Right? Because you believed in your employee. How many companies exist like that? Maybe a handful? Yep. Maybe a handful. The rest want to own the employee. They want to just, how can I say it? They want to take the most out of them. That's what they want to do, right? They want to exploit as much as possible and then hire a new one when they burn out. Unfortunately, that's 99.999% of the industry, right? That's the unfortunate bit. And so I worked at that consulting company. Yes, it was bad. It was horrible, but it was my paid MBA. I got paid for an MBA. I learned how to make budgets. I learned how to make timelines. I learned how to organize projects and so on and so forth. I knew how to even relate this because in Canada you got a lot of subsidies. Okay, well, in the proposal I'll put in, if you're going for this subsidy, you get 10%. Putting all the connections, they would see this proposal and be like, okay, well, clearly you know what you're doing. Can you develop this? Yeah, I'm the one who's developing it also. And people didn't really understand that I was the person who's going to be developing the solution, right? And so at some point I decided to leave, and I'm like, this is too much. You're telling me no too many times. You're killing my morale. Will you be my first client? That's what I did. You're my employer. Will you be my first client? I will charge you exactly what you pay me per hour with taxes and everything. All upside to you. You don't need to carry me as an employee. I still do the work for you, but now I can go ahead and do whatever it is that I want to do, right? And get new clients. All in all, during my consulting, I made about $2 million, right? And being, again, the entrepreneur, I'm like, well, I'm already working 40 hours. I can spin up a startup at the same time. Come on.
Why not?
I don't need outside money. I can fund it myself. Yeah, that was a smart move. No, that was not a smart move. Never invest your own money. Get a loan, totally fine. I didn't know. I didn't have that education, that financial education. I came from poor parents, right? So I didn't have that financial education. Also, I knew VCs existed, but guess where they didn't exist? Canada. Guess where they really didn't exist? Montreal. Okay. Now we've got $1 billion circulating in Montreal, right? We have a vibrant $1 billion. That's peanuts basically in San Francisco, right? You find $1 billion, I think, in the gutters. But now we have it. Back then, I went to banks to ask for loans, and that's as far. I didn't know where else to go. Sure. I didn't have advisors or mentors. There was nothing around you to help you, to advise you, to guide you. There was no organizations, nothing, right? Unfortunately. And then 2008 happened. And the financial crash. And then all my contracts got pulled. I overinvested in two startups at the same time because I thought I was, pardon my French again, it's shit. And I learned the hard way. Everything collapsed on me. I had to let people go that I really, really liked, my employees. I had to let them go. I paid them a nice severance. I was able to live off the money for a few months until I got I got a job. I got a job.
Yeah. So let's maybe pause there and zoom out just to summarize what I think I heard. So you built this nice little practice at an extremely young age. Mm-hmm. You've netted a couple $1 million over the course of this very young consulting business that you started for yourself. And were you just reinvesting those? I understand that wasn't probably cash in the bank, but it sounds like most or a good portion of that went away with the financial crisis. Is that right?
It all went away with my investments in my startups. So I hired people to build, and I was juggling everything. And I made the classic mistake of being in the middle of everything instead of on top of it. I was working in my business instead of on top of it. I could have hired a few more people to let them just do their best, but I micromanaged to hell and back, and I knew that micromanaging was bad on top of that. That's what it is, right? So how can I say? So I learned the realities of running a business. I learned the realities of cash flow management very, very, very well. And thankfully, when I had, cash flow was down and cash in the bank wasn't there, my employees said, okay, you can pay me in an extra week when the invoices come in. Right? They were very nice and friendly because I was good to them. I was very, very good to them. I was training them and coaching them and helping them and whatnot, right? But as is life, everything collapsed in 2008, close to 2009. Everything started to collapse.
You were your own VC and your attention was split, I guess, too much of an extent. And you had this perfect storm of the great financial crisis that hit. And so I think you mentioned you go back to the corporate setting, maybe your tail between your legs at this point. But I would imagine, Oshri, that even going back and having the quote unquote traditional job, you're going to have a different perspective going into that job, and you're going to have a unique perspective as opposed to just doing what you're told.
Yes, because I was able to make technical decisions with my own money, right? Oh, we need new service. Well, back then there was no cloud, right? Okay, I got to call the hosting company and $50,000. Okay, I guess it is what it is because we need new servers. It is what it is, right? We always need a backup and hard drive and this and that and maintenance and all that stuff. Back then you had to keep hard drives, on top of your machine, RAM, CPU, everything on top of the machines with an extra machine on at all times, but not getting any traffic. And it's about to go down. Click, click, click. Let's do this. Let's switch the hard drive and so on and so forth, right? A lot less elegant than throwing a credit card at the problem.
Sure.
Which is my sales pitch to client. I design your solution, so you throw a credit card at the problem. You grow your business. We deal with the details later. They love it because, machines are cheaper than people. So there's that. I went back into the working world and I was very much unhappy. I was very, very unhappy. I actually went into depression, into a deep, deep, deep depression, developed anxiety because I knew this wasn't my space. It wasn't my place. And so I job hopped for 6 or 7 jobs over 10 years, right? Never staying for more than 1.5 to 2 years. Sometimes because I didn't want to. It was because I didn't like the job. Sometimes because the people, the bosses were horrible. They're just horrible, right? I had, at one of my jobs where I was CTO, I was hiring people in a medical firm, and I was literally told, we don't hire N people in this company. Straight up. By a founder who's 28, 29 years old. I didn't know people this young could be racist. I honestly did not know this, right? Not in Canada, at least. Yeah. And boy, was I wrong. And that will knock you off your socks, I'll tell you that much. Yeah. That will knock you off because that candidate was good. I don't really care. I don't care. And I was forced to hire somebody else that was worse.
Yeah.
who ended up getting fired anyways after 3 months.
Yeah.
Because it was just not good. Right. And I left that business within 3 months. I had a young baby at the time. I couldn't just leave. But believe me, if I had the money in the bank, I would have walked out at that point in time. I'm like, yeah, okay, see ya, laptop, we're out.
Going through that experience, I think you loved the job, but you disliked the boss. And maybe this was the boiling point there. Do you feel like that maybe helped you, or maybe help better inform later businesses that you would go on to create for yourself, or even in the job you do now in terms of like relationship management?
Imagine loving a job so much. You're at the top of your career. I was CTO. Doesn't get any higher.
Yeah.
I made it. I was making the decisions. I was helping people. I was coaching. I was growing a company. I had shares in the business and whatnot. Imagine being forced to hate your job by your bosses.
Yeah.
And that was not even the worst thing they would do, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were very insulting. They were racist. I'm of the Jewish faith, as if that really matters, not even visibly in any way, shape, or form, but they would make fun of it and so on. It was just a very, very toxic environment.
Sure.
I liked the money. I liked the title. It was not worth it.
Yeah.
It took me a year and a half of therapy afterwards to deal with it, to deal with the fact that I stayed for an extra 3 months.
Yeah.
That alone. Because I felt like I'm selling my soul here. But I needed it. I had a baby. I had a house. I just can't leave.
Yeah.
So you have to eat it and accept it for what it is.
Yeah, no, that's tough, man. I want to ask also, did you, during these 10 years of kind of moving from job to job, did you have a master plan that you were maybe executing in the background, or were you just trying to figure it out and find yourself?
I was leveling up my position every time. I was not willing to move downwards. That's the reality. And I moved really fast, right? I moved really fast. I had my own business, so some people understood that. Entrepreneurs understood that. Okay, you made decisions with your own money. You'll make good decisions for me. And I made good decisions, right? I think I did, at least. In retrospect, maybe not, but who knows, right? In retrospect, everyone messes up. But yeah, no, it's definitely helped me. And unfortunately, because I was constantly stressed for money, right? New family, expensive. Babies are expensive. I don't know if you know that.
Yes, they are. I
Diapers.
do. A 15-month-old. I totally agree.
Yeah, every time is $1. Boom. Especially if you go organic. Whew, it's gonna hurt. And so I tried to level up my position constantly, from CTO to director to VP to this and so on and so forth. And that's also when I started to realize, a CTO at a startup is an engineering manager at LinkedIn. Barely. A VP of engineering at LinkedIn doesn't even touch startups anymore. Is a founder, is a CTO at their own startup that they start on their own, right? And I realized there and then that the title was bound to the size of the organization. And that is a huge problem in our industry, because you can't tell. If I was a VP of engineering in one place at a startup, and I'm applying for a VP engineering at a major company like LinkedIn, they're not going to look at me, even though the kind of work that we're doing is very similar.
Yeah.
Still budgets, still managing a team, and so on and so forth. And so whenever I would interview, and I interviewed at LinkedIn enough times and got rejected enough times, they would interview you and they would ask you, how many people have you managed? And I was a smartass. Doesn't matter how many people I've managed. I'm not managing 500 people. You think I'm calling 500 people? No. I'm managing 3 or 4 or 5 directors that have 5 managers under them, or senior managers who have 5 managers under them, who have 5 developers. I'm managing 5 people. I'm making decisions over a large scale. Yes, totally understand that. But they didn't appreciate that answer because it was a smart answer.
Yeah.
They didn't appreciate that answer when you tell them, like, your question, in fact, is wrong in itself.
Yeah.
Right? Which, in reality, what they should have done is say, this guy's smart.
Yeah. Well, at least you knew yourself. You weren't going to, mold or change to what they were looking for to the extent that you were going to have to sell yourself out. I feel like you stood by your beliefs there and you told them the truth, even if that's not something they want to hear.
Yes. And that's also when I realized that the people in those positions don't understand anything. They don't understand how the world actually works. They're stuck in their bubble, their executive bubble, where everybody tells them yes. And I realized that, I couldn't work for these organizations even if I wanted to, right? And I already knew I had to go back off on my own. I just needed enough runway to help me there, right? Sure. Enough runway. And so I worked for another 3 or so companies. The last company that I worked for, hyper growth company. Beware of any company that hyper growths. Seriously. I'm telling all your entire audience, if you apply at a job and they're saying they're hyper growth, don't apply. Don't. Because any company that hyper growth has their culture completely destroyed, actually has no culture until they evolve into one. Right? And so I got this job from a CTO friend of mine who was the CTO. He's like, yeah, I'm going to get to work with one of my friends, with my mentor, right? At that point, I've amassed a few mentors here and there. I get to work with my mentor. Excellent. Awesome. He decided, no, that's not the business for me, right? So a couple of months in, he left, right? Also be careful. Never get hired through someone, ever, because you are bound to their position. If their position goes sideways, you go sideways. Get recommended by all means. Go through the standard process. And so that company received $125 million, then $50 million. I'm like, why would you, out of France, of all places, why would you get so much money for what? For like QR code paying at the table, QR code?
What are you gonna do with it all?
That doesn't require $150 million, guys. Like, it doesn't. And they started acquiring companies all over the world that did something similar. And they bought one in Montreal. And the CTO of that company, who's, they had like 100 or so clients, 150 clients or so they were barely able to pay rent, said, well, if you're going to buy me, I want to be director of technology for North America. He has 2 years of experience. And guess what? Guess who was director of technology for North America? This guy. I was director of technology for North America.
He wanted your job. I see.
Yeah,
okay.
he wanted my job. And guess what? He got it because they wanted to acquire the clients. They didn't care. I was a number. I was not a person, right? And I found out when I realized I stopped getting emails, and I'm like, what's going on here? People forgot to tell me that I lost my job.
Really?
That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
Right? And so they gave me 3 weeks of severance. Using that severance, I said, you know what? F it. I went and I got a line of credit from the bank, and I'm like, I'm going off on my own. No way this is happening again. And so here we are, a year and a half later. Just a year and a half. It sounds like it's a long time ago. Nope, it's a year and a half.
And you haven't looked back since, and that's so amazing, man. And now, so I guess now we're moving to the fractional CTO, and maybe just as a quick definition of terms for those unfamiliar, how would you define the term CTO? And I think you've got this 4-part framework. Definitely interested in maybe peeling back the onion there as well.
So the CTO title has been bastardized by Startup Land. Startup Land is not a real place. It's a rosy place with paths made of gold, right? And you've got people hopping around and so on and so forth saying AI and getting $100 million for it, I can also say AI and get $100 million. AI metaverse, 200 million. Oh my gosh, careful. Throw Web3 into it.
Yeah. NFTs a couple of years ago.
Whew. You get too many investors, licking their lips with no business plan whatsoever, by the way. I don't have to have a business plan because that's how it works.
Yeah.
And so in Startup Land, the CTO role evolves way too quickly in any business, in any startup, because the startup itself evolves too quickly. Heck, the founder of a startup sometimes can't even be CEO of the startup because it's too big for them. That's it. True. They had the idea. They're the soul of the company. Great. Now you need to bring in the business person to execute. That's the reality, right? And most of them screw up. Heck, look at FTX, right? I mean, that was illegal, but I'm sure at some point they had good intentions. Yeah. And then they went sideways because, I don't know, they needed another pool.
Well, hypergrowth too, I think, to an extent, to speak to your
right, a hypergrowth, right? Everybody was giving them their money. Everybody was investing in them. No one decided, hey, let's look under the hood. And so the startup role evolves in 4 parts. At the beginning of the startup, the CTO has to be an engineer, 90% coding. Great engineer, great architect, the whole thing. They know all the latest and greatest. They need to build this code. They need to hack away with the rest of the devs. But within about a year or so, or one generation, that's called generation because a generation could be 2 years, 3 years. Within a generation or funding generation, now you have a team. So you're going from creative to management. Anything less sexy than management, you think?
Some people can make that change, but not all, for sure.
Most people cannot because engineering is a creative role. You're asking me to code all day long. Now I have to tell people how to code. And and actually, you're not supposed to tell people how to code. You're supposed to guide them,
right,
and explain to them and sell them on your idea. From engineering to sales, okay, fair enough. You can manage a couple of people. You can stumble your way around. Most CTOs in a startup don't survive past generation 2. They quit, or they get fired, and they get replaced by someone more experienced. But if they manage to get it there, they go from manager to leader in generation 3. Now you've got multiple teams. Now you're in control of culture. Like, you have to make sure culture is good. You have to make sure career paths are good. That's even less, for me, I find it exhilarating. I love it. But most people, they don't care about this, right? So they do that, and they're in a leadership role, very difficult. Generation 4, they are visionary. Now they have to think about how the business will evolve on a technical basis. Hey, Stack Overflow's lunch is being eaten by ChatGPT. Well, someone at Stack Overflow should have thought about that when they saw LLMs come out, right? Or they should have seen that they're being scraped or something. Somebody needs to think beyond the code, beyond technology, right? How is the industry evolving? They need to pay attention to that. Very few people are able to do that, right? That's the reality. Very, very few. Hire dyslexic people, by the way, if any employers are reading this, because there'll be a pain in the ass to talk to, but they'll come up with good solutions. And pay attention to when they say anything.
It sounds like your biggest qualm then with the CTO is that it's this almost like an umbrella phrase used to encapsulate each of these 4 distinct roles. And maybe that's where this fractional model enters.
Exactly. But to add insult to injury, the CTO also gets a ton of stock options to write code. You get stock options. Why? Why are you getting stock options? Yeah. So by generation 2, they've reached their first year. Now they're growing. Now there's funding. Now they're exercised their cliff, right? And they leave. Usually 3 to 4 days later, a couple of weeks later, maybe even a couple of months later, after screwing the pooch completely, usually. And that's where people call me. They're like, Oshri, we need your help. Our CTO just left. Why? Did he just leave after vesting? Yeah, he did. Yeah, she did. Oh, okay. Gee, what would that happen? How would that happen? Because that's the reality. Because you gave so many options to someone who's just coding, who hasn't proven their valor.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why I advise founders, I'm like, 2-year cliff, not 1 year. 2 years. After 2 years, you'll know if this person is good. Give it a 50%. They'll get the same amount of money, but after 2 years. They don't get to vest after the first year. But, again, I'm ahead of my time. Watch this happen in 10 years, be the standard. Yeah. Right? And so that's where the fractional CTO role comes in, because I don't take equity. I don't believe that my work is valuable enough for equity. I don't. Right?
That's an interesting take. And it's also fair to say, I heard you mention your goal is to replace yourself after N months. You basically put the systems in place, get the people in place so that you can call up the founder and say, hey, stop paying me. You don't need me anymore. Exactly.
And I love getting fired. It's fantastic. I love it. I make myself replaceable, because the reality is, when you empower a team to make decisions, you put in the right foundation. Oh, well, okay, you're doing a lot of ETL work. Guess what? You don't need a bunch of random processes. You need an ETL server and a data orchestration server. Let's put it in. This is how we do things. Oh, you have 6 different databases? Let's put a data warehouse. Now everything has to go there. And your reporting is built off of that. Oh, excellent. Great. Once you put in the right foundation, people will generally follow that path. They don't need more of you. What else would I do? So usually the last 2 months of a 6-month mandate, I do very little work and I just pay attention. I literally stop calling people on the spot. I want to see if they operate on their own.
Yeah.
I make myself scarce. And I tell the client, this is exactly what I'm going to do. It usually takes me about 4 months to renovate any team. And I'm able to do it by myself, no staff, nobody else. Because I approach problems from a human perspective.
Yeah.
I tell them and I teach them and I guide them. And also, I'm very, very effective because I'm not afraid of getting fired. Let's go back to that one. I'm not afraid of getting fired. I'm going to take all the risk for a decision.
Yeah.
All of it. It's like, Oshri told us to do this. So if it doesn't work out, which it hasn't yet, if it doesn't work out, it's Oshri's fault. He told us to do this. So we can operate freely. When you eliminate the risk of getting fired, your people will produce miracles, outright miracles. if guided properly, or they'll produce complete trash. One of those two. There's no real middle ground in this case, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to ask you. How do you balance that versus having them also take ownership in the processes that you're trying to instill, or maybe that's part of the secret sauce that you're curating over the past year and a half?
So what I do is I teach them about business value. I show them the money. I help them. I follow the money with them. I explain to them why you need an ETL server. Why? Okay, because you need to manage this process. Because you don't want to be called whenever something miraculously doesn't happen, doesn't work. You want a self-healing architecture. That's what you want. You know, you're in data engineering, right? So, you know, why do you need to invest in data quality? Right. Guess what? You know, your ML model built on faulty data is going to be a big problem. Yeah. So you need to invest in it. Yeah. But you already know that. Some people don't. Yeah. Right? Some people don't. And there are very few tech leaders in the industry relative to how many developers there are that are able to make a sale like that. And tell developers, this is good for your career and this is why you need to do it this way. Yeah. I'm leveling you up. And I tell the employer, listen, I'm going to level them up. They're going to want to leave if you don't pay them more, by the way, just letting you know. I'm going to make them amazing. And I do. And their developers go from junior to senior in a few months because I get them to think like a senior. How does a senior think relative to a junior? Yeah. They understand the business value of it all. They go see beyond the code. The code is just, it's whatever, it's a tool. Yeah. The code is 10% of the job. Yeah. How does it fit into the solution? How is this code going to be maintained? How is this system going to be operated? That's a big thing. How are you going to operate this solution that you just presented to me? And I usually get met with blank stares, right? When you're building a data engineering pipeline, how are you going to operate it? Well, we've got Airflow, or we've got this, or take a look at Mage AI, by the way. Beautiful stuff. Okay. Take a look at Mage AI. All right. Puts Airflow to shame. Oh, so beautiful. It's a brand new startup that I've worked with. They're going to like being mentioned. So please mention them in the notes.
All right. No equity, I guess. Still a little bit partial, but no equity. Okay.
No equity. They're not even a client. I just love their product.
Okay.
I just love their product and I help them get there, get their product up and running. That's it. Sometimes I help just to help because they don't need me, but you know what? People give me a chance. I believe in karma in some weird way. Yeah. So that's how I operate. I'll take a group of juniors, move them into seniors, and be around to answer their questions and guide them. Yeah. The good ones will ask me questions constantly. The bad ones will never ask me a question. Those are usually phased out.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I tell this and I drill this into the teams that I manage, right? There are no stupid questions. Literally, there are no stupid questions. There are stupid people who don't ask questions. So don't be stupid. Ask a damn question. I'm there. I'm available. I'm being paid for this. I'm on Slack. Just mention me. Oshri, how do we do this? Boom. I'll get on a huddle with you, and if I can, in a few minutes.
Yeah. No, the only stupid question is that remains unasked. I absolutely love that. And Oshri, I know we're coming up on our time, but before you get out of here, I would love to throw you on the hot seat and better understand your psychology if you're up for it.
Yes, let's do it.
All right. What does your typical morning routine look like?
Typical morning routine is drinking some mate. I don't drink coffee anymore. Forget coffee. Coffee's bad. Coffee gives you the jitters, and I need 2 pots, right? At least. So mate does not give me the jitters and gives me the energy I need. I'll take care of my kids, obviously, drive them to school. So we'll do double drop off, my wife and I together. I like to do that with my wife, right? I'm a parent. I'm involved in it, right? I'll do a little bit of work, CrossFit in the afternoon, right? I won't eat breakfast and I won't eat lunch because it slows me down. So I'll have a protein shake in the morning. I'll have a protein shake before I train and a protein shake afterwards. And that's good enough. And then some nuts. And that's it.
That's it.
Right? That's it. And then dinner is dinner. And I'll go to sleep around 9, 10 p.m. Sometimes around 8 p.m. if I've had a really tough day. Like today, I rested yesterday, so I'm good. But today, it's not bad. I'm until 7, Yeah. But I will never miss dinner. Okay. No matter what, I will never miss dinner. I will work afterwards. After my kids go to bed, I will come back to my office. I'll do another couple of hours of work that I need to do, and that's it. Right? But a lot of my work is in real time. Because if I design a solution with my team, it's on the spot. It's right now. right? Like face to face. There's no, I'm not going to work in the back end because I'm not going to do the work for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to help you do the work yourself. That's how I'm able to manage teams of 160 developers, right? Yeah. How I'm able to do service teams in Egypt, India, Bangladesh, most of Latin America, in the US and in Canada, right? I'm able to do that all one person because I delegate everything to them. I make myself available. So the force multiplier of having a fractional CTO, whew,
love it.
It's big. It's nice.
All right. Do you see your children pursuing traditional education?
Not in the slightest. They're both dyslexic. They're both wildly intelligent, and the school system is a complete and utter failure. It's all reading based and writing based, which dyslexics don't operate in. They are visual. They can speak. My 6-year-old speaks has a language proficiency of a 12-year-old, but the emotional state of a 6-year-old, obviously, right? And so when he tells you something, you better listen. He's not like a dumb little 6-year-old.
Sure,
gets it. He's like, he says, no, I don't like school because of this. You better pay attention. He's not trying to get out of it. He's telling you something, and it's really hard to change that mindset. Yeah. But I see my kids having their own business. When they're 13 years old, I intend on buying them a small web business and letting them run it. That's their MBA right there.
Love it.
But I'm most likely homeschooling anyway, so who knows?
Yeah. No, I'm with you there still. My wife and I are trying to decide, but our opinions, I guess, aren't far from your own. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
Whatever. Some people are going to make millions of dollars because they know something other people don't. Most people are going to lose their shirts and work at McDonald's. Nah, not yet. It's going to get overly governed because the government will put laws on it, which will make it just as flexible as the standard monetary system, right? That's it.
Yep.
I don't see that anywhere. Having said that, I'll still invest in it. I'll still buy a couple here and there.
Hedge your bets.
Right? Yep. But I mean, I'll buy one Bitcoin because that's too much. I'll buy a couple of shares, and see some investment going. Put it as part of your portfolio, but don't think you're going to get rich out of it. Sure.
That's it. And of course, not financial advice. We always lead with that. For the lawyers.
Non-financial advice, please. Yes. I know nothing about money. Yes. I don't think if you realized that in the previous conversation.
Speaking of money, and last question, if money didn't exist, Oshri, what do you think you would do every day with your time?
I would be a farmer. That's my end goal. My end goal is to make enough money so that I can farm for fun and for money, but I'm not stressed about it, and just enjoy every single day, and that's it. And write some code. Build something on the side. I don't care what it is. Coding for fun? Yeah. Come on. Coding for fun? That's the best. I'm working on a machine learning model right now, or multiple machine learning models, because one model can't do everything, right? For fun, and I'm learning this whole concept, which I've never touched before. So,
Part-time programmer, part-time farmer. I love that. Oshri, you have an amazing story. I'm so appreciative of you coming on here, sharing it. Where can people go to find out more about you or connect?
Oshri Cohen. That's my website. My LinkedIn, right? There's very few Oshri Cohens. Trust me, it's me. There are very, very few. It's a very, very uncommon northern Israeli name. North of a very small country. And that's it. Contact me. Get there. Yeah. People contact me all the time to help them build their business to start, and I'll do it for free. I'll do it for fun because I just want to help people.
I love that. I love your story. It was a pleasure getting to know you today. I'll be sure to add links to the show notes. And I wish you the best going forward. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. If you got value from today's show, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and a review on Apple or Spotify. It's a free way you can support the show and help other people just like you find the story and others like it. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow the show on whatever podcast application you use. And most importantly, if you know someone that might be interested in breaking into tech, tell them about the show.